In the vast reaches of the galaxy, where countless stars sparkled like diamonds in a sea of black, the Elysians had once been a proud and flourishing civilization. Their world was known for its lush forests, towering cities, and remarkable technology. For centuries, they had stood among the most powerful and respected species in the galaxy, allies to many races, and a symbol of peace and prosperity. But that was before the war. The Elysians had been dragged into a brutal conflict when a powerful, aggressive alien species, the Vecna, began attacking neighboring systems. Their allies promised to stand by them, but in the end, the Elysians were betrayed. One by one, their allies abandoned them, leaving them to fight a war they could not win. The Vecna overwhelmed them, leaving their planet in ruins. The once vibrant cities lay in ruins, the skies now filled with dust and smoke. The Elysians, once proud and confident, were now a broken race, struggling to survive on their dying planet. They had been abandoned by the very galaxy they had once protected. The galaxy, now a cold and indifferent place, moved on. Other species, more concerned with their own survival and power, paid no attention to the plight of the Elysians. News of their downfall spread quickly, but no one cared to help. The galaxy's focus shifted to other matters, leaving the Elysians to fend for themselves in the dark corner of the galaxy. But there was one race that refused to turn their back on the Elysians: humanity. On Earth, far from the struggles of the alien worlds, a decision was being made. In a dark, quiet room in a high-security government building, a group of human leaders gathered around a large table. The room was filled with hushed voices, the weight of the moment heavy on their shoulders. They had received the news of the Elysians' downfall, and their hearts were heavy with both sympathy and determination. "We cannot ignore this," said General Marcus Hayes, his voice firm and resolute. "The Elysians were our allies. We cannot turn our backs on them now, not after everything they have done for us." At the table, several others nodded in agreement, though some faces were filled with doubt. They knew that helping the Elysians would not be easy. The galaxy had already turned its back on them, and humanity had its own struggles to face. But the idea of leaving an entire race to perish without even trying to help seemed wrong. "Are we ready to take on this responsibility?" asked Ambassador Lisa Nguyen, her voice calm but filled with concern. "We could face a great deal of opposition. Some factions in the galaxy may see our involvement as a threat." "I don't care," replied General Hayes. "The Elysians stood by us when we needed them. Now it's our turn. We cannot allow their legacy to end like this." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone pondered the decision. It was risky, dangerous even, but in their hearts, the humans knew it was the right thing to do. They could not ignore the suffering of an entire race simply because the rest of the galaxy had decided it was no longer worth saving. With a shared look of determination, the group made their decision. "We will help them," said the president, his voice resolute. "Prepare the fleet. We leave for Elysia at once." The decision was made. Humanity would risk everything to help the Elysians, even if it meant facing the scorn of the galaxy. They would fight for those who had been forgotten. News of this decision spread quickly through Earth's network of ambassadors, diplomats, and military leaders. The message was clear. Humanity would no longer stand idly by while innocent lives were lost. Whether the rest of the galaxy agreed or not, they would offer aid to the Elysians. The first steps toward a new mission had begun. In the meantime, on the surface of Elysia, the few remaining survivors were holding on to hope. The planet had been shattered, its once proud cities now little more than ruins. The Elysians had gone into hiding, struggling to survive in the shadows of their fallen civilization. They lived in fear, knowing that any day, the Vecna or another enemy could strike again. Hope seemed like a distant memory. But as the days passed, something changed. The wind whispered through the ruins, and a signal was sent, an unexpected signal, one that reached deep into the galaxy, all the way to Earth. It was a cry for help. For the Elysians, this was their last chance. They had nowhere else to turn. The galaxy had abandoned them, but the humans were different. They had shown compassion before, and now, it seemed, they might just be their salvation. And so, humanity's decision was made. The human fleet would head to the Elysian homeworld, ready to offer help, no matter what challenges lay ahead. They would be the ones to stand by the Elysians in their darkest hour, showing the galaxy that even when everything seemed lost, there was always hope. The human fleet, a collection of advanced ships designed for exploration and defense, moved quietly through the stars toward the abandoned world of Elysia. The journey was long, and the silence of space seemed to stretch forever. Yet despite the vast emptiness surrounding them, the crew aboard the lead ship, the Elysium, could feel the weight of the mission. This was no ordinary journey. It was a mission of hope, a mission to save a species that had been forgotten by the galaxy. Captain Maria Alvarez stood on the bridge of the Elysium, gazing out at the dark expanse of space. Her eyes were focused, her expression serious, yet a small spark of determination burned within her. The rest of her crew moved about the bridge, performing their tasks, but there was a quiet tension in the air. No one knew exactly what awaited them on Elysia. The reports had been scarce, and the planet's distress signals had been weak, almost as if the very planet was on the brink of dying. Still, they pressed on, knowing that there was no turning back. "Captain, we've just received a signal," came the voice of Lieutenant Jacobson, one of the communications officers, breaking the silence. Maria turned her attention to the officer. "What kind of signal?" "It's faint, but it's definitely from Elysia." "It's a distress signal, one we haven't heard before," he replied, his voice filled with uncertainty. Maria's heart skipped a beat. The Elysians had been sending out distress signals for years, but this one felt different. The signal was much stronger, almost as if it were a cry for help, an urgent plea that had finally reached the human fleet after all this time. "Can we boost the signal? Trace its origin?" Maria asked, her voice firm but filled with a sense of urgency. Jacobson worked quickly, his fingers flying over the control panel. The hum of the ship's engines seemed to grow louder as the crew waited for a response. After a moment, he looked up, his face pale but determined. "The signal is coming from the surface, deep within the planet's central region. It's as if someone is trying to reach us directly." Maria nodded, a sense of purpose filling her. "Prepare a team. We're going down to the surface." The Elysium began its descent toward Elysia's surface, the planet's shattered atmosphere stretching out before them. From the viewports, the crew could see the destruction that had been wrought upon the once beautiful world. The landscape was barren, scarred by the ravages of war, with large chunks of the planet's surface floating in space like fragments of a broken dream. The sky, once clear and bright, was now a dull gray, filled with swirling clouds of dust. As the ship approached the surface, the crew could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The planet's gravity was weak, and the air was thick with dust, making the descent challenging. Yet they pushed forward, knowing that every second counted. The ship touched down with a soft thud, sending a small tremor through the crew. The landing area was surrounded by ruined buildings, their structures broken and crumbling, evidence of the devastation that had once been Elysia's great cities. The team quickly gathered their equipment, preparing to disembark. "Stay sharp," Captain Alvarez ordered as she led the team to the airlock. "We don't know what we're walking into down there." The door opened with a hiss, and the team stepped out into the desolate landscape of Elysia. The ground was cracked and uneven, and the air was cold and dry. The wind carried with it a faint, mournful sound, as though the planet itself was crying out for help. They moved quickly, following the signal's faint trace. The ruins of the ancient city loomed in the distance, a dark shadow against the gray sky. As they neared the source of the signal, they noticed a small group of figures standing in the shadows of a broken building. They were watching the humans approach, their faces obscured by hoods, but there was no mistaking the look of desperation in their eyes. Captain Alvarez stepped forward cautiously, her hand raised in a gesture of peace. "We come in peace," she called out. "We are here to help." The figures hesitated for a moment, their eyes darting nervously between each other. Then one of them stepped forward, revealing a young female Elysian. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. She looked human, but there was something about her, something both alien and familiar, that set her apart. "We didn't think anyone would come," the Elysian said softly, her voice trembling. "We've been waiting for so long." Maria's heart went out to her. "You're not alone anymore," she replied gently. "We're here to help you rebuild, to protect you." The Elysian's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at the humans. "You're really here?" "Yes," Captain Alvarez said, nodding. "We'll do everything we can." The young Elysian stepped forward, her hand outstretched. "Thank you," she whispered. "You are our last hope." As the team gathered around her, Maria couldn't help but feel a deep sense of responsibility. They had come to help the Elysians, but she knew that their mission was only beginning. The galaxy had turned its back on these people, but humanity had chosen to stand by them. And with that decision, Maria Alvarez and her crew were about to change the course of history. The small group of Elysians led Captain Alvarez and her team through the crumbling streets of what had once been a bustling city. The silence was unnerving. The only sound was the crunch of their boots on the dry, cracked ground as they moved through the desolate landscape. The city, once a symbol of Elysian pride, now lay in ruins, a ghost of its former self. As they walked, Alvarez couldn't help but notice the dark, haunted expressions on the faces of the Elysians who had greeted them. Their clothes were tattered, and their eyes spoke of pain and fear. These survivors had been through unimaginable hardships, but there was also a flicker of something else in their eyes. Hope. It was fragile, but it was there. The young Elysian woman who had first stepped forward, her name was Aria, continued to lead the group. She walked with a quiet urgency, as if she had something to show them, something important. Captain Alvarez and her team followed closely, their weapons holstered but ready, ever watchful of the dangers that might still lurk in the ruins. After what seemed like hours of walking through the decaying city, Aria stopped in front of a large building, one that looked slightly more intact than the others around it. The structure was covered in layers of dust and debris, but there were signs of recent activity. A small door was cracked open, and faint light seeped through the cracks. "This way," Aria whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. She pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward into the darkness. The team exchanged uncertain glances. "What's down there?" Lieutenant Jacobson asked, his hand instinctively resting on his sidearm. "Please, just come," Aria urged, her voice filled with desperation. "It's important." Maria nodded, signaling for the team to follow. The air grew cooler as they descended the staircase, the faint light growing dimmer with each step. The narrow corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the walls covered in strange symbols that neither Maria nor her team could recognize. At the end of the hallway, they reached a small, hidden room. The walls were lined with strange devices, some of which looked like ancient technology, and others that appeared more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. The room was filled with a low, humming sound, as if the devices were still alive, waiting for someone to activate them. "What is this place?" Captain Alvarez asked, her voice filled with awe and confusion. "This is the heart of our world," Aria replied quietly. "This is where the Elysians once held our greatest secrets. We believed it would be lost forever, but we found it again, hidden beneath the ruins." Aria gestured toward the center of the room, where a large, spherical device sat on a pedestal. It was glowing faintly, its surface covered in intricate patterns and symbols that seemed to shift and change before their eyes. "This is our last hope," Aria said, her voice trembling. "It's a device that can restore our planet, but only if we can figure out how to use it." Maria stepped forward, her eyes scanning the device carefully. She had seen technology like this before, in old Earth science fiction movies, but never in real life. This was something beyond anything they could have imagined, but there was no time to waste. If this device could really help the Elysians, they needed to understand how it worked, and fast. "What does it do?" Lieutenant Jacobson asked, his curiosity piqued. "It's not just a machine," Arya explained, her voice filled with both fear and excitement. "It's a part of our ancient technology, a tool created by our ancestors. It can rebuild the planet's ecosystem, restore the air, the water, the soil. It can heal the damage caused by the Vecnar and bring life back to Elysia." Maria's eyes widened. The implications were immense. If they could get this device working, they could save the Elysians, restore their world, and turn the tide in the galaxy's view of them. But there was a catch. "We don't know how to activate it," Arya continued. "Our ancestors left us clues, but they were lost when the Vecnar attacked. We've tried everything we could, but the device remains dormant." Maria studied the machine closely, her mind racing. This was the key to saving the Elysians, but it was also a puzzle, one that had to be solved if they had any hope of turning Elysia's fate around. But with the galaxy still indifferent to their plight, and enemies like the Vecnar lurking in the shadows, time was running out. "We'll figure it out," Captain Alvarez said firmly, her voice resolute. "We've faced impossible odds before. If this machine can save Elysia, we'll make it work." Arya's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "You'll really try?" "We will," Maria assured her, her gaze unwavering. "We didn't come all this way just to turn back now. We're in this together." As the team gathered around the device, their minds focused on the task ahead, they knew that this was the turning point. The fate of an entire species rested on their shoulders, but they had already made the choice to fight for the Elysians. They would not give up. Not now. Not ever. The mystery of the ancient device would be uncovered, and with it, the future of Elysia. But as they worked to solve the puzzle, they could feel the weight of their mission growing heavier. The road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but they would not rest until the Elysians had a chance to rebuild their world. And in doing so, they would show the galaxy that humanity was not just a force of power. It was a force of compassion and determination, willing to fight for the forgotten, even when no one else would. Captain Alvarez and her team stood around the mysterious device, the only source of light in the otherwise dark chamber. The hum of the machine filled the air, a constant reminder of the task they had ahead of them. Despite the hope the device promised, there was an overwhelming feeling of uncertainty. The fate of the Elysians rested on their ability to unlock the secrets of this ancient technology. Maria took a deep breath, her eyes focused on the symbols and patterns that covered the machine's surface. The lines seemed to move as if they were alive, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves, making it nearly impossible to make sense of them. "We've got to figure this out," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "If this really can restore Elysia, we can't afford to waste time." Arya stood beside her, her gaze fixed on the device, her face a mixture of hope and fear. "We've tried everything. The patterns don't make sense. But you came here with a purpose. Maybe you can do what we couldn't." "We'll give it our best shot," Maria said, turning to face the rest of the team. "We need to start from the basics. Let's break down each part of the machine and see if we can find a clue." Lieutenant Jacobson and the rest of the team gathered around, carefully examining the strange symbols and markings. The device seemed to be more than just a simple machine. It appeared to be a part of something larger, something ancient, possibly connected to the origins of the Elysians themselves. But the pieces didn't fit together, and no one knew exactly how to bring it to life. As the team worked, a faint noise interrupted their concentration. It was barely audible, but Maria's instincts told her something wasn't right. She glanced around the room, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. The others noticed her sudden movement and paused, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. "What was that?" Jacobson asked in a whisper, his voice tense. Maria held up a hand to signal silence. The sound, like distant footsteps or something moving just outside the door, was growing louder. Then, to their surprise, the door to the chamber creaked open slowly, revealing the shadowy figure standing in the threshold. The team immediately took defensive positions, weapons raised, ready for whatever might come through. The figure stepped into the light, and the tension in the room eased just slightly. It was an Elysian, another survivor, but not one they had seen before. He was tall, with dark, weathered skin and sharp, calculating eyes. His appearance was striking, yet there was a coldness to him that sent an unsettling chill through the group. "Who are you?" Captain Alvarez asked, her voice firm, though she could sense something off about the man. "My name is Kalen," the stranger said, his voice low and calm. "I am one of the last of the Elysian High Council." Maria's eyes narrowed. The High Council? But we thought the entire council had perished during the Vecnar attack. "Most of them did," Callan replied, stepping further into the room. "But not all of us. Some of us survived, and we've been watching, waiting for the right moment to emerge." Maria studied him carefully. He didn't seem like the kind of man who could have been hiding for so long. There was a sharpness to him, a sense of purpose that seemed at odds with the despair of the planet around them. "What do you want?" Lieutenant Jacobson asked, his voice suspicious. Kalen's lips curled into a slight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want to make sure that the device you're trying to activate doesn't fall into the wrong hands." "What do you mean by that?" Captain Alvarez asked, her guard going up again. Kalen's expression hardened. "The device you are attempting to activate is not just a tool for restoration. It has power, powers that no one, not even your kind, should wield without knowing the consequences." Maria's eyes locked onto his. "We're trying to save your people. We don't have time for games." "I am not playing games, Captain," Kalen said, his voice now sharp with urgency. "The device is a weapon. An ancient weapon created long before the Vecnar invasion. It was designed to be the ultimate defense, capable of wiping out entire civilizations. The High Council kept it hidden because they feared what would happen if it was ever misused." The room fell silent as the weight of Kalen's words stank in. Maria's mind raced. Could this machine really be a weapon? Had they been so focused on saving the Elysians that they had overlooked the dangers of what they were dealing with? "I know you want to help us," Kalen continued, his voice softening. "But you must understand. The device, if activated wrongly, could destroy Elysia once and for all. Even the smallest mistake could trigger its full potential." The words hit Maria like a blow. She had thought they were simply trying to activate a tool for restoration, a way to bring life back to a dying world. But now, Kalen's warning made her question everything. "We can't risk it," Maria said firmly, her mind made up. "We'll find another way to save Elysia. We won't activate this device unless we fully understand it." Kalen nodded slowly, his expression showing a flicker of approval. "Good. But be warned, Captain. There are others who want to use this device for their own purposes. The Vecnar are still out there, and they will stop at nothing to claim it." With that, Kalen turned and left the room, disappearing into the shadows from which he had come. Maria and her team were left in stunned silence, processing the gravity of what had just happened. What had once seemed like a simple mission to help an abandoned species had now become a complex struggle for survival. The device that could save Elysia might also destroy it, and with enemies like the Vecnar lurking nearby, the danger was far from over. Maria turned back to the device, her thoughts racing. The mission had just become more complicated, but one thing was clear: they had to be careful. They weren't just fighting for the future of the Elysians. They were fighting to ensure the galaxy's safety as well. And with Kalen's warning in mind, Captain Alvarez knew that the real battle was only just beginning. Captain Maria Alvarez stood in front of the massive wall of screens in the command center, her mind racing. The news had come in just hours ago. Vecnar ships were detected on the edge of the Elysian system. The enemy wasn't waiting anymore. They were coming, and their target was the very device the humans had come to unlock for the Elysian salvation. "We don't have much time," Maria muttered under her breath as she turned toward her team, who were all gathered around her. The gravity of the situation had weighed heavily on everyone, but now there was a cold resolve in the air. They knew what was at stake. "Captain, we've detected the enemy fleet," Lieutenant Jacobson said, his voice tense as he looked up from his console. "They're making their way toward the abandoned Elysian city. If they reach it, they'll have control of the device." Maria nodded. She had expected this. The Vecnar were ruthless, and they had a long history of taking advantage of opportunities like this one. She had no illusions about what they would do with the power of the device. "We have to stop them," Maria said firmly. "We can't let the Vecnar gain control of the device. It would be disastrous for everyone, not just the Elysians." But the situation was complicated. The Vecnar weren't just a military force. They were cunning, well-equipped, and relentless. The humans and Elysians together might be able to mount a defense, but the odds were against them. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Any ideas, Captain?" "Area," the Elysian engineer asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. The weight of responsibility had been heavy on her since they had discovered the device's true nature. And now, facing the Vecnar, the pressure only intensified. Maria looked around the room, her eyes scanning the faces of her team. Each one of them had come here with a different goal, a different hope, but now they were united in the same purpose: to protect a world and its people, and to stop the Vecnar from destroying it all. "We're not just going to fight them head-on," Maria said, her voice steady. "The Vecnar are too strong for that. But we have the advantage of surprise. We know the terrain, we know the device, and we know the enemy. We use that." Jacobson raised an eyebrow. "Surprise? How do you mean?" "We'll split into two groups," Maria explained, her mind working quickly. "One group will create a distraction on the outskirts of the city, drawing the Vecnar forces away from the device. The second group will infiltrate the city, secure the device, and ensure it's not activated by the wrong hands. We need to hold the line, no matter what." The team listened intently as Maria laid out the plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best option they had. Time was running out, and they couldn't afford to hesitate. "I'll lead the group to secure the device," Maria said, determination in her voice. "Jacobson, you'll lead the distraction team. Area, I need you with me in the city. You're the only one who can help understand how to deactivate the device if we need to. We'll need your expertise." Area nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Understood, Captain." Maria took a deep breath, turning her attention back to the screens. The Vecnar fleet was getting closer. They had no time to waste. "Let's move out," she said. "We've got a world to protect." The streets of the abandoned Elysian city were eerily quiet as Maria and her team moved through the ruins. The once beautiful structures now lay in ruins, evidence of the devastation the Vecnar had brought. As they made their way toward the central building where the device was housed, Maria couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The Vecnar had a knack for hiding in plain sight, and she knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. "Keep your eyes open," Maria whispered. "They could be anywhere." Area, walking beside her, nodded. "The Vecnar are masters of stealth. If we're not careful, they could strike at any moment." Maria's heart raced as they approached the central chamber. She could see the large, dark entrance ahead. The heavy doors that had once stood as a barrier to protect the device now lay cracked open, as if inviting them in. But Maria knew better. This was no invitation. It was a trap. Suddenly, a shot rang out. The team froze. The silence was shattered, and their once cautious steps were now replaced with hurried movement. They dove behind a broken pillar for cover, scanning the area for the source of the shot. It wasn't long before they saw them. Vecnar soldiers emerging from the shadows, weapons aimed at them. "Fire!" Maria shouted. The sound of gunfire filled the air as the team returned fire, the harsh flashes of blaster fire lighting up the darkened streets. Maria's heart raced as she led the charge toward the building. They had no choice but to push forward. But the enemy was relentless. The Vecnar were everywhere, their numbers overwhelming. For every Vecnar soldier they took down, 2 more seemed to appear from the shadows. It was a desperate battle, but Maria and her team fought with everything they had. The distraction team, led by Jacobson, was supposed to keep the Vecnar's attention focused on them, but it was clear that the enemy had anticipated this. They had split their forces, and now both groups were facing the full force of the Vecnar. "We need to move faster," Arya shouted, her voice strained. "The device is just ahead." Maria nodded, determination burning in her chest. The fight wasn't over yet. They had to reach the device, no matter the cost. "Push forward," she yelled. For the Elysians, and for the future of the galaxy, the battle raged on in the streets of the abandoned Elysian city. Captain Maria Alvarez, her heart pounding, led her team closer to the heart of the city, where the ancient device was hidden. The Vecnar soldiers were relentless, their presence overwhelming. Yet they could not stop the humans and Elysians, who fought with unmatched courage and determination. Maria's team was exhausted, but they kept pushing forward. Every step felt heavier, and every moment seemed like it could be their last. She could hear the crackle of energy blasts and the distant sounds of the distraction team fighting off enemy forces. The Vecnar were everywhere, but they had a clear mission: reach the device, protect it, and make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. "Captain, we're almost there," Arya said, her voice low but determined. The Elysian engineer had been working tirelessly to decipher the secrets of the device, hoping to find a way to deactivate it if necessary. But the situation was growing more desperate with each passing second. Maria nodded, trying to ignore the exhaustion that tugged at her every muscle. The device was close. She could feel it. But so were the Vecnar. A loud explosion shook the ground beneath them, sending debris flying through the air. "Keep moving," Maria shouted over the noise. "We don't have much time." They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the deserted streets as they finally reached the entrance to the central building. The doors, once majestic, were now broken and charred from previous battles. Maria hesitated for just a moment, knowing that the final confrontation was about to take place. "Arya, you're with me. We're going inside," Maria said firmly. "The rest of you, stay here and keep the Vecnar from following us." "Understood, Captain," Arya replied. Maria and Arya entered the building, the silence inside striking compared to the chaos outside. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as they made their way down a dark hallway, the only light coming from the dim glow of the ancient technology around them. The device was at the end of the corridor, its sleek, metallic form reflecting the faint light. As they approached, Maria could feel the hum of energy that emanated from the device. It was alive, pulsating with power that could change the fate of the galaxy. "This is it," Arya whispered, her voice filled with awe. Maria's eyes were fixed on the device, her mind racing. They had come so far, and now it was within their grasp. But the question remained: what would they do with it? The device had the potential to either save the galaxy or bring destruction on an unimaginable scale. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the hallway. "You think you can control it?" The voice was cold and mocking, belonging to a Vecnar commander who had somehow found his way into the building. Maria spun around, her hand going instinctively to her sidearm. The commander stood in the doorway, flanked by several Vecnar soldiers. His eyes gleamed with malice as he regarded Maria and Arya. "You're too late," the commander sneered. "The device will be ours, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Maria's heart raced. The Vecnar had made their move. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the galaxy. "We won't let you take it," Maria said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. The Vecnar soldiers raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Maria and Arya sprang into action. They took cover behind a nearby column, narrowly avoiding the barrage of energy blasts that followed. "Area, can you get to the device?" Maria shouted over the noise of the battle. "We need to figure out how to control it." Area nodded, her eyes focused. "I'll try, but I need time. The device is complicated. There's a lot I still don't understand." The Vecnar commander sneered. "You think you have time? The device will be activated soon, and then it won't matter how hard you fight. The galaxy will kneel before us." Maria gritted her teeth, determined not to let that happen. She motioned to the rest of her team, signaling them to provide cover. The Vecnar soldiers were closing in, but they couldn't let the commander reach the device first. "We can't let them activate it," Maria said urgently. "Fight with everything you have. Hold them off." The battle intensified, but Maria's mind was focused on one thing: the device. If they could secure it, they might still have a chance to stop the Vecnar. But if the commander succeeded in unlocking its power, all would be lost. Area, her fingers flying across the device's interface, looked up at Maria. "I think I've got it. I can shut it down, but I need a few more seconds." Maria held her ground, her weapon aimed at the approaching Vecnar. "Hurry, Area. We don't have much time." The tension in the room was palpable as the Vecnar commander advanced, a smug grin on his face. He knew the humans were running out of time, and he was ready to seize victory. But Maria would not allow that to happen. She fought with every ounce of strength, her resolve stronger than ever. She could hear the sound of the device humming louder now, as if it too understood the gravity of the situation. Finally, with a triumphant shout, Area pressed the final sequence of commands. The device flickered, then powered down. A rush of relief washed over Maria as she realized they had succeeded. But the Vecnar commander wasn't finished. He lunged forward, aiming to destroy the device. "No," Maria shouted, rushing toward him. In that moment, Maria knew what had to be done. She had one last choice to make, one that would determine the future of everything they had fought for. Maria's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted towards the Vecnar commander. The device was safe, for now, but the commander was still a threat, and he had the power to turn the tide of the battle in an instant. Maria's mind raced, weighing her options. She couldn't let him take the device, not after everything they had sacrificed. The commander sneered, his cruel smile widening as he raised his weapon toward her. "You're too late. The galaxy will bow to the Vecnar, and your efforts will be meaningless." Maria's fingers tightened around her weapon as she drew it, aiming directly at the commander's chest, not while I'm still breathing. He fired first, a blast of energy cutting through the air. Maria dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the shot. She rolled behind a pillar, heart racing, and immediately fired back. Her shot hit one of the Vecnar soldiers, sending him collapsing to the ground. But the commander wasn't alone. More Vecnar soldiers flooded the hallway, their weapons raised and ready. The odds were against them, but Maria wasn't ready to give up. Not now. "Area," Maria shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Is there any way to activate the device again? We need more power." Area was hunched over the control panel, her fingers flying over the buttons. She didn't look up, but Maria could see the concentration on her face. "I think I can power it up again, but it will take time. Just hold them off a little longer." Maria nodded, her eyes narrowing. She had to keep the Vecnar at bay. The fate of the galaxy depended on it. She peeked around the pillar, her weapon steady, and fired another shot, hitting another Vecnar soldier in the leg. He collapsed to the ground with a pained scream. The Vecnar commander snarled, his face twisted with fury. He shouted commands to his soldiers, and they began advancing, their weapons aimed directly at Maria. She fired again, but the odds were overwhelming. She was outnumbered, and the Vecnar were closing in fast. "Keep moving," Maria shouted to her team. "Don't let them surround us." Her team fought bravely, but it was clear that the Vecnar were starting to gain the upper hand. Maria's energy was waning, and her movements were slower, but she refused to stop. She couldn't let the Vecnar win. Then, just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, a brilliant flash of light lit up the hallway. Maria shielded her eyes, and when she opened them again, she saw Aria standing near the device, her hands raised to the sky. The device hummed to life, and a surge of energy crackled through the air. The Vecnar soldiers paused, momentarily stunned by the overwhelming power that filled the room. Maria could see the fear in their eyes as the device powered up, its energy radiating outward. Aria had done it. She had activated the device again, and now they had the advantage. The commander was not pleased. He roared in anger and charged toward Aria, his weapon raised. Maria didn't hesitate. She fired a precise shot, hitting the commander in the shoulder. He staggered back, growling in pain, but still determined to reach the device. Aria, Maria shouted, her voice filled with desperation. Get away from the device now. Aria didn't hesitate. She darted out of the way, leaving the device to continue powering up. A beam of light shot from the device, and the Vecnar commander was engulfed by the energy. The light flared, blinding everyone in the room, and when it faded, the commander was gone. The Vecnar soldiers were now disoriented and terrified. They had seen the power of the device, and they knew they couldn't match it. One by one, they dropped their weapons and surrendered, unwilling to face the might of the humans and Elysians any longer. Maria stood panting, her chest heaving as she lowered her weapon. She looked around at her team, who were equally exhausted but victorious. They had done it. They had defeated the Vecnar and protected the device. The galaxy was safe for now. Aria approached Maria, a look of relief on her face. We did it. Maria smiled, though it was a tired smile. Yes, we did. But this isn't over. The galaxy still needs us. The humans and Elysians had come together to fight for a cause greater than themselves. They had chosen to defend the abandoned alien race, standing up against the forces that sought to destroy them. And in the end, their strength, their unity, and their determination had won the day. But Maria knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be threats lurking in the shadows. As the team gathered around the device, they made a promise to each other. They would continue to protect those in need, to stand against any force that sought to harm the innocent. The device was powerful, but it was the courage of the humans and Elysians that had truly saved the day. They had chosen to defend the abandoned alien race, and in doing so, they had forged a bond that would last for generations to come. And as the stars twinkled above them, they knew that the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. They were ready for whatever came next. Together, they would face the challenges of the galaxy, knowing that as long as they stood united, there was nothing they couldn't overcome.